All right, let's jump right into this explainer. We are tackling a massive mathematical mystery today, one that stretches all the way from the Omega program's bizarre transport anomalies straight through to some incredibly strict new guardrails for QED environments. We're going to treat this analysis like a real mathematical debate. We'll be critiquing the models, stress testing the equations, and hunting down alternate methods. Because let's face it, sometimes the math we rely on is exactly what's hiding the truth. So let's see how the research team completely flipped their methodology to finally crack this thing.
Here's our roadmap for the breakdown. 1. The transport paradox. 2. Covariance and concentration. 3. The scale inflation culprit. 4. Separating gauge and geometry. 5. QED pseudo-modes versus metaphysics. And finally 6. The next successor programs.
Section 1. The transport paradox.
So what exactly is the core paradox here? Well, we had a distinct signal, System B, acting as this incredibly stable, high-energy anomaly. The initial debate within the team naturally gravitated toward the tools. Are the transport operators themselves just fundamentally broken? But when they rigorously interrogated their own equations, they had a wall. The operators were perfectly conditioned, no rank deficits whatsoever. So the debate had to shift. If the operators are totally stable, why on earth are they generating such wildly unequal residual observables across different systems?
To answer that, we really need to evaluate the alternate mathematical methods they brought in. They deployed a tool called the persistence ladder, and it proved that their previous models were severely compressing the data. I mean, we're talking about a massive drop-off here, an effective rank retention of just about 0.48 when projecting from 5-dimensional space down to 2 dimensions. The main critique? The old math was basically churning out projection artifacts. It was flattening everything out and completely destroying the true shape of the anomaly.
And this brings us to the first major paradigm shift. The instability wasn't caused by the transport operators breaking down. It was entirely about how the data itself was organized. That whole operator instability hypothesis completely falsified. By ditching the old equations and pivoting to analyze the metrics-based covariance instead, the team proved that this anomaly is, without a doubt, a covariance phenomenon. Section 2. Covariance and concentration.
Before we dive deeper, we have to understand that this residual energy is really just stable transport acting on unevenly concentrated data. But the team had to tread very, very carefully here. Internal debates warned of falling into what they called a scalarization trap. This is the mathematical danger of taking highly complex, multi-directional structures and just crushing them down into single, simple numbers. To avoid bad methodology and actually see the truth, they had to explicitly preserve the entire structure.
Now, the data reveals a really staggering realization. The transport system manages to keep its full 5-dimensional capability, yet the observable discrepancy is violently compressed down into essentially a single 1-dimensional axis. Basically, the transport system allows for complex motion, but the observable reality is severely constrained, funneling absolutely everything into one dominant mode.
Think about that alignment magnitude of 0.98. That near-perfect alignment between the metric covariance and the residual axis is the absolute smoking gun. It proves that covariance is what dictates the observable discrepancy, not the geometry. The alignment with the transport geometry was incredibly weak by comparison. This definitive split blows the mathematical debate wide open.
Section 3. The scale inflation culprit.
So System B isn't merely large, it undergoes superlinear accumulation. We are talking about genuine multiplicative growth across the transport chains, jumping from 11.9 to 31.2 up to 153.5 and rocketing all the way to over 1,000. But again, let's stress test the math here. Was this actual physical growth or just an illusion caused by the equations aligning the same way over and over? By stepping back and dynamically evolving the spectra, their alternate methods confirmed it. This is true multiplicative growth, not some mathematical artifact. Which means System B's expansive nature is hard-baked into the individual generators right from the start, long before any interaction even takes place. And here is the huge mathematical critique that broke the case. The transport generators were not unit normalized. Because they completely skipped that crucial normalization step, the raw channel acted as an active growth carrier, which was artificially inflating the results.
Section 4. Separating gauge and geometry. All of this leads to the deepest conceptual inversion of the entire program at phase omega.14. System B isn't dynamically unstable at all, it just lives in a geometrically scale-inflated metric regime.
Once the team forced the math to use unit-normalized generators, that artificial expansion just completely vanished. It was a gauge bifurcation, not a transport instability. We were literally just looking at the whole thing through a distorted mathematical lens. By breaking down the transport operator into two distinct steps, scaling and rotation, we finally get to separate the messy gauge artifacts from the true invariant geometric structure. Step 1 isolates S, the scaling that controls the expansion. It's universal and, crucially, it's removable. Step 2 isolates R, the rotational geometry that actually holds the invariant structure. When you strip away that scaling noise, the structural alignment actually improves. The original models weren't destroying the structure, they were finally revealing it.
Section 5. QED pseudomodes versus metaphysics. Shifting gears slightly to recent integrations, this QED paper beautifully maps the environment as completely inseparable from the system. It stores history not as some external note, but as endogenous state variables. It completely replaces standard reservoir approximations with an exact mapping, mathematically compressing a continuous infinite-dimensional environment into effective discrete auxiliary degrees of freedom called pseudomodes. The memory is mathematically locked in as a state. However, we have got to put up a massive do not enter sign right here. This is a strict mathematical mapping of an environment, and it absolutely must not be conflated with metaphysical analogies. The director's critique here is severe and rightly so. No consciousness interpretations, no photon ontology claims, and no collapse as awareness narratives. You cannot map these pseudomodes to human cognition. The structure is purely mathematical, and doing anything else completely violates the program's theoretical guardrails.
Section 6. The next successor programs. So, with the paradox resolved, we now have 3 distinct, mature successor programs to choose from. This moves us way beyond simple debugging and pushes us into true foundational theory. We've got formal mathematical theory, empirical generalization, and information geometric interpretation. So, what is my concrete suggestion for the research director? Honestly, start with the formal mathematical theory. The gauge covariant transport equations are already mature enough to formally lock down right now.
Because this quote right here just perfectly compresses the entire program's findings into one mathematically coherent, incredibly satisfying resolution. We debated the initial assumptions, we threw out the scalarization of covariance, we forced a strict mathematical separation of gauge and geometry, and we arrived right here. Observable residuals are gauge-amplified projections of covariance geometry transported by stable rotational dynamics. The transport was perfectly stable all along, only the observable amplitude was being inflated by the gauge. As we close out this explainer, I want to leave you with the ultimate frontier question for these new successor programs. When you strip away all of that mathematical scaling noise and remove the gauge, what is the true invariant shape of the universe underneath? That is the real geometric information theory program lying ahead of us. Keep interrogating the math, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.